My friends, today we have an unusual story, or at least one of those claims of a speedrun world record that causes you to pause and scratch your head, at least for a moment. And it all starts with this post to r/N64 on June 23rd, 2024. A post that reads this: I just found out that 20 years ago, my dad was secretly playing Nagano Winter Olympics 98 on the N64. So I went to look at the rankings, and according to my research, he holds a few world records in downhill alpine skiing. And there's just one image attached showing this: alpine skiing, downhill, the cartridge's leaderboard showing times ranging from 1:15.85 to 1:15.99.
Here we go!
In order to fully understand what's going on here, we need to know a little bit about this game, Nagano Winter Olympics 98, and this particular minigame, Alpine Skiing Downhill. You see, Nagano 98, as I'll call it, is obviously the officially licensed Winter Olympics game for that year for the Nintendo 64 and PlayStation 1. And so it holds a strangely near, dear, and niche place in the hearts of some 90s gamers, especially those who love these sorts of sporting minigame challenges. In this game, there are 10 playable events. Things like downhill skiing, ski jumping, speed skating, aerials, snowboarding, even curling. This might actually be one of the earliest representations of curling in any video game or computer game, which is cool in its own right, as curling debuted as a fully fledged Olympic sport in 1998 after having been held as a demonstration event in previous years, and a contest held in 1924 that wasn't fully sanctioned as official by the International Olympic Committee until 2006. But anyways, we'll try not to get caught in the weeds of curling too much on this one. The other minigame competitions in Nagano 98 are things that naturally call to a certain type of gamer. The speed gamer, hoping to improve their personal scores bit by bit, constantly racing, optimizing your movement to get a better and better time displayed at the end, saved into your cartridge, or in this case, the controller memory pack. Now look, Nagano 98 is pretty niche, and so competition has not been as fierce throughout the ages as it has been in other games like GoldenEye or Mario Kart 64. And for what competition and submitted scores there had been, much of it was done on the Nintendo 64 version rather than the PlayStation version. I find this to be a common theme among these sorts of niche sports games that release on both N64 and PS1 in that era. For some reason, the competition high scores only seem to take place on the Nintendo 64 versions. I don't really know why this is. Maybe PlayStation gamers just naturally weren't as interested in speed gaming back then? I don't know. If you have a good theory about that, please comment it. But I digress. Also, there have been a handful of scores submitted on emulator for this game, and you can really see how much faster they are on emulator than N64, really showing just how laggy the N64 console is in comparison to a perfect, ideal, 30 frames or 60 frames per second setting like we have on modern PCs. And this is a particularly extreme example, so just make sure if you're doing your own research, you're not confusing emulator runs with N64 console runs. Okay, so anyways, the mere nature of a game that features races of speed and saves or displays your best time calls to these sorts of gamers to push things lower and lower. In particular, the Alpine Skiing Downhill category is simply a skiing race, where all you need to do is steer with the control stick and press A to edge the skis for tighter turns, which slows you down a bit. So you really want to press A as little as possible, but as much as is necessary to actually make the turns and make all the gates and make your way down the course. Now, the downhill category is not to be confused with the slalom competition, where the poles or gates are closer and tighter. There's just two different variations of skiing. There's even a few more in the actual Olympics, but there's these two in this game, and we're focused on the downhill category here. So, let's revisit that image posted to Reddit in June 2024. Now, immediately a couple of things pop into mind. As someone with speedrun experience, this is actually the kind of results page or leaderboard that one would expect to see from someone really grinding a time down, with hours upon hours of speedrun attempts. A good example is Mario Kart 64, where the results page in time trials saves your top 5 best times down to the 100th of a second. And so you'll see among the top players, their top 5 times are usually within a few hundredths or frames of each other, because that's typically how often you come close to improving your personal record or world record over the course of your long and arduous grind in the speed game of your choice. We can see, for example here, on legendary Mario Kart 64 player Matthias Rustmeyer's Frappe Snowland record, that his top 5 times are all within 0.15 seconds of each other, from 1:58.27 to 1:58.42. And similarly, on Daniel Burbank's Luigi Raceway 3-lap times, they're from 1:57.61 to 1:57.71. His top 5 times all within 0.1 seconds of each other. This is typical and expected in racing games that save many of your best times. And so OP's screenshot passes the vibe check, or the grinder's check. But what about the actual time? 1:15.85 in Alpine Skiing downhill game. Is such a thing possible? So here's where it gets pretty weird. I would have 2 places in mind to visit to see what scores have been submitted in this minigame and find any more proof or evidence on what times are possible. speedrun.com and Cyberscore, and we will go check those in a moment. But we see OP post in the Reddit thread linking a website I've never seen before, videogamesrecords.net, which seems sort of like a clone of Cyberscore. Maybe it's someone's passion project to make a website like this. But the scores are completely different here than on Cyberscore. It almost feels like walking into a parallel universe or something. On this site, we see the fastest time ranked as 1:16.02 by a gamer named Croctus, and we have screenshot proof of this score. Now in this case, OP's dad does indeed have a faster known time. We see a couple of other submissions here too, a little bit slower, that also have screenshots offering proof of the achievement. Honestly, I was just so stunned seeing this website in the first place. I never heard of it. I can't imagine who's submitting times to this lesser known place. And it's like, how did OP find it instead of finding his way to speedrun.com or Cyberscore instead? This is almost its own mini mystery to me, but I'll digress on this one as well. Because when we consult these other sources, we do find something much more expected. The best submitted time with video evidence is actually a 1:15.38 by a gamer and Smurf enthusiast who might be somewhat familiar to viewers of this channel, named Zwiop or Danny, who I've discussed in regards to his score in the 100-meter dash record in the game International Track and Field 2000. Now, Zwiop has a video, and based on the full breadth of proof Zwiop has for these sorts of Olympic sporting minigames, I consider this 1:15.38 to be the best, most substantiated world record claim. Now here's the thing. Zwiop posted this video on February 14th, 2022, a little more than 3 years ago. And OP's post is from June 2024, 2 years after Zwiop scored his record time. Now you'll note among the submissions across speedrun.com, Cyberscore, and even videogamesrecords.net, OP's dad's 1:15.85 would be good enough for second place to this very day. So if OP's dad got his time of 1:15.85 before Zwiop's record in 2022, then he probably would have held the world record at some point. Based on context from OP's posts and replies, it does seem as though his dad did achieve these times a long while ago. For example, someone in the thread asks, in regards to the title, why secretly? To which OP replies, I guess it was still taboo for a parent to play video games back then. He was waiting for me and my brothers to go to bed to have the console for himself. Another comment thread does direct OP to speedrun.com, in which OP realizes that his dad was not far from the record, though another commenter points out what is probably true, that OP's dad did have the world record back then, whenever then was, and it would have lasted until 2022, when Zwiop, who specializes in these sorts of games, finally went out and beat it. Honestly, I just love this story quite a lot. I really imagined this sort of mood of this dad waiting for his sons to go to bed and then turning on the N64, finally getting an hour or two to himself at night and just grinding, not even a whole game, not even a very common or popular game, but this relatively obscure game, Nagano 98, and even within that, an obscure minigame, Alpine Skiing Downhill. And like that specific race being his complete reprieve to, the chaos and trials of raising a family, as amazing as that might be, just to get a few moments of peace on this skiing hill. And you can imagine him playing day by day, for days on end, weeks on end, this sort of being his habit or ritual before bedtime to play this game. And the sort of strategies that he had to identify and learn himself. And we have seen in the Speedrun Worlds these cases where these guys have sort of appeared out of nowhere with knowledge that you would think would have to be, learned online from a community collaborative setting. So this kind of thing does happen, as shocking as it is. And I just believe the story. It's a cool story, and I want to believe it. And I mean, look, it's a screenshot from an old video game. It's not like there's really an immense reason to fake this. Although, of course, sometimes people do fake stuff for no reason. Everything just adds up here based on the times, the personal records being closely compacted, and based on the story, based on what we know is possible today, based on who holds the record. And it reminds me of a couple other stories I've heard, like, a pal who I'll leave nameless for the sake of this story, who was a wave race speedrunner. He said, his dad never cared much for his own video game play, but the one game that they ever played together was Wave Race, specifically the Sunny Beach course. And so Sunny Beach really comes and means a lot to this gamer over the years. He thinks fondly of the time spent playing video games with his father when he plays Sunny Beach. Or even, I remember being about 11 or 12 years old and having a friend over for a sleepover. And my father comes in at, 1 or 2 a.m. one night during the sleepover and comes to us and says, "Hey boys, how do you beat the friggin' frigate?" And he was having trouble actually just figuring out how to pause to take out the tracking bug to throw on the pirate helicopter and complete the frigate mission. And so that's kind of a similar situation where, the dad is kind of secretly gaming, nobody really knows, and the things that they might get up to, whether they're successful like OP's dad or less successful and needing a bit of help like my own dad when it comes to frigate. And so this story just put a smile on my face. OP's dad probably had a really great record in Alpine Skiing Downhill in Nagano 98, and I just want to share it with you all in the research I've done and the rabbit hole that it kind of took me down. So thank you all for watching, my friends. A huge thanks to the supporters on Patreon and the channel members here. Stay true, my friends, and I will see you in the next stream or video.